The chart you see in front of you here is what we refer to as our MEDEC chart. It's really the overall look or the foundation of longevity that we try to use to help bring some things into focus. MEDEC is for mind, environment, diet, exercise, and community. And so those are really the pieces we're going to talk about here and how it all fits together. And really, I guess what I'd start with is that really by the time we're age 50 and certainly age 60, these are things we need to start to be taking fairly seriously in terms of how our life fits into this overall balance. So as we think about longevity as our goal in mind, or starting with the end in mind, as Covey would suggest, there's really three elements that we try to focus on. One is happiness. We all want to be happy, sustain happiness. We're all on board with that. We're also all on board with health span. And if you're not familiar with health span is really just the description of how much of your life or how many years do you have of healthy living. So the better we do at maintaining overall health, the more extended health we're going to have. And alternatively, obviously, if we don't pay much attention, the likelihood of us having long health span is diminished. And then the other is significance, and that relates to maybe what you might think of as purpose, or you get up in the morning, what's your drive look like, and what does that mean perhaps after your life, even if you think about from a legacy standpoint of what do you want people to remember you for. So as we put all that together, that paints a fairly encompassing picture of longevity that everyone should be able to find something that fits in there. As we start to look at what wraps around longevity, it's primarily genetic related. And why that is because longevity is essentially how long is our body going to live. Well, and genes are the things that control our cells, and both in our actions and ultimately how long we're going to live. So the better we do at keeping that network of genes communicating and working well, the better our health and everything is going to be for us. So as I start with genes, in terms of the 20,000 genes that we humans have, generally you can think of those as the hardware or their coded genes. They're the things that describe the color of your eyes, the color of your hair, how much you look like your mother or your father perhaps, and why twins look alike. We're all fairly familiar with those, but it's really the epigenome and the microbiome that are really of most interest to us, because those are both highly dynamic and we have a lot of influence on them. So as we look at the overall map here, you can see a relatively small portion is fixed. We've got a lot of influence on all these other areas which ultimately play out in longevity for us. So we can think about epigenome is really talking about gene expression. We're not going to get too deep into that obviously now, but it's really we all carry all sorts of potential diseases within us, but nothing happens until that gene gets expressed. And that's why it's so important to understand what things turn on the good responses in our epigenome and what things turn on bad responses that we want to avoid or at least defer as long as possible. And the other is the microbiome. You may have heard this in the context perhaps of diet more recently, and the microbiome is now related to the bacteria within our systems and the genes within those bacteria. So we've got all this network of communication going on between our genes and certainly within the bacteria and how that interacts. And just to give you a sense of scale, we've got about 20,000 genes, I said here. We've got about 20 million genes in the bacteria within our body. So bacteria plays a far bigger role in terms of overall health maintenance than our fixed genes. So those are really the things we want to pay attention to. So let's start with the mind, and the reason why we want to start with the mind is because a couple of reasons. If you haven't got on board with kind of getting your head in the right place, you're not unlikely to make much progress anywhere. So it's obvious that let's get things sorted out from the start as what our objectives we're trying to achieve in our life. And the other is this element of stress. Again, if we've got a lot of negative stress in our life, it's going to spill over into everything. And virtually every expert you talk to is probably going to tell you if you've got significant stress issues, there isn't much that, say, diet isn't going to fix that stress, exercise isn't going to fix that stress. They may help, but ultimately we want to look at stress fairly seriously if we have much. And there's positive stress, right? Positive stress is great for us. We associate that with purpose. That's why we want to get up and going. We get great hormonal responses to that. Flip it around if we have a lot of distress or negative stress. We had a cortisol response to that, and cortisol it produces oxidative stress on our cells, which causes them to die prematurely, which shows up obviously in both health and longevity. We know that meditation, for example, is one tool we'll talk a little bit about. It actually lengthens our telomeres, which are the caps on the ends of our chromosomes. So that's a way we know we can extend the life of our cells by extending the telomeres, because they are the finite determinant of when cells actually die. We also know from it that people who are educated tend to live longer because they have more knowledge, and they generally are going to make better health choices. Not a guarantee, obviously, but that's certainly where the data would point us. So as we work around the wheel, environment is that outside world in terms of the air we breathe, the water we drink, the soil where all our food comes from. Both the positive and negative effects associated with those environmental factors are going to play into our epigenome. Any microbes that maybe come from the environment will impact us as well. And then we've also got our home environment, and our home environment is very much within our control. We can think of the home environment in a way we might think of as a child. We might have thought that living in a treehouse would be the ultimate life experience, and our parents realized functionally maybe that wasn't a great idea. Well, even the home that has been great for many years may not play out very well in the long term, because our homes really weren't designed for people to live to much beyond the age of 70. So lots of things we can do there to make that a sustainable environment for us as well. On the diet side, oh man, lots of discussion around diet lately, isn't there? And that's good, because it means that there's a healthy discussion and a healthy debate going on around it. I'm not too worried around what is the right diet for you today, other than we know the standard American diet is clearly in trouble, and there's some obvious directional indications that would suggest that a plant-based diet is universally the only diet that has been shown to produce longevity. We'll get into that a little bit more when we start to talk about diet. So generally around diet, maybe what I'll talk to now is just the quality of food. Obviously, we want to not have food that's coming from an environment that has toxins associated with it. We want to make sure that the quantity of our food is appropriate for our daily activities. And the other aspect we'll talk a little bit later on in the course is around timing. And really here we're talking about fasting. We all fast every night when we sleep. Well, there's some things you can do around fasting that seem to have some interesting longevity implications. Exercise. We all exercise, right? It's one of those things that can start to slide as we get into our busy years. We get busy with our careers and busy doing things for everyone else. It's clearly important. We need to have exercise throughout our lifetime. Half hour a day is great. If you're able to work in some intensity, even better. And then the sleep or the restorative component goes with exercise as well, because that's really, again, in the balance of things, we want to make sure we're doing restorative work within ourselves that only happens during sleep. On the community side, we can look to some great studies that have been done around it. The two that come to mind would be the Harvard study. Men, over 80 years, they've been studying men throughout their whole life. Some really fascinating data that's come out of that, and interesting learnings. And we can look at the blue zones. Of the 7 blue zones around the world, we'll take a look at what's that data tell us around what are these factors, and which ones should we weigh most important. And so hopefully you're starting to get a sense now, and I can take just one or two examples. And if I said, if someone's under a lot of stress, what's the likelihood that their diet is going to be impacted, that their exercise is going to be impacted, and their community is going to be impacted? Of course, it's going to have a lot of impact, right? So we start to see how this interdependence starts to play into all of these. And so while you may have a particular focus on exercise, for example, it's equally important that we look at all these other areas. And I'll just say for all of you that one of the things that are really important to keep in mind is that we have lots of experts out there doing some great work, but generally even in that area what I see is they tend to be focused just on that area. So I'll use diet back as the example again. All these debates on diet and forgetting about all these other areas, it's really gets us confused and in trouble. So really partly what we're trying to do with this is to really help distill down. These are really the key elements we need to work on, and let's start to understand those a little bit better. And then naturally everything starts to fall in place. It all becomes very simple, and you'll find that your stress level naturally will come down as you start to understand this a little bit better, and you naturally get more control over the things that are well within your control, and life just starts to get happier. You'll start to discover your health is going to get better, and you'll have more time to focus on the things you'd really like to. So hopefully that's helpful, and we'll talk to you again soon.